Thank you very much, Chair. I certainly hope that the Minister is there to listen to my questions because I do want him to answer them. Firstly, given the revenue shortfall caused by slow economic growth and limited space to borrow more money, are you intending to increase tax in February to fund the shortfall? Specifically, are you intending to increase VAT or personal income tax or other tax? That's question one. Then question two, on this SRD, you mentioned that it will be extended for another year, but you also say in the accompanying documents that there is no policy decision made yet and that there is also no funding agreed for it yet. So how will you fund this SRD extension, given that it's approximately 44 billion rand? Then question number three, why did you not mention the cost of living and how South African households are battling? And why did you not cut the tax and levies on fuel and expand the zero VAT rated basket of food to bring immediate relief, because that was possible? And then my fourth question, you mentioned a fiscal anchor. What do you have in mind for that? I already have a responsible spending bill on the table introduced in Parliament that could actually provide that anchor. So what do you have in mind about that anchor? And then number five, do you support the postponement of the pension reform that will bring relief to members by permitting them access to a portion of their investment before retirement? And then my last question, number six, what are the details of the Transnet bailout? What happened to your tough love approach, Minister? Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Josh, thank you very much. Honorable Tutoy, please come in.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Minister, with the department's health baseline being adjusted downwards, it in effect confirms that for the next 5 years budget, no funds will be available for the NHI. Minister, the reduction of the health budget's baseline over the medium term will mean that the NHI has been and will be a futile exercise. How do you intend to fund this? Second question, Minister, mention is made of funds being sourced from the World Bank and the IMF, but no mention is made of BRICS. Why is this? Do we get any financial support from BRICS? Because it is clear that South Africa's affiliation with BRICS definitely isn't conducive to ties to the Western world, where we currently get funds from by means of loans, and also the export and imports that is reliant on the West at this stage. Next question, Minister, the MIG grant reduction is very troublesome since a lot of municipalities are reliant on MIG funding to pay salaries and to do the necessary in those municipalities. How do you intend to fill up the shortfall that there is or will be at these municipalities? And what do you think would the result of this be in the long run? And then, Minister, last question with regards to the Eskom relief debt bill. The question should be, what has triggered the amendments to the conditions of the initial bill, given that there is now an amended bill before Parliament, which will soon be referred to the NCOP for concurrent, and whether there are any specific issues there? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Tutoy. Honorable members, I've just been made aware that amongst us are members of the portfolio committees, finance from the provinces. Honorable members from the provinces, you are welcome, and please feel free to participate in the engagement. Honorable Alexander.
Thank you very much, Chair. The question I have to put to the finance team is, while we all appreciate the need for South Africa to balance the proverbial checkbook, obviously when there's a shortfall, we have to make cuts there. It alludes to the fact that there will be cuts across all departments in order to try and balance this checkbook. Is it fair that these cuts will be made proportionally across all the departments, and in some cases actually putting departments that are functioning well and managing their affairs well, being penalized for departments that potentially have not managed their financial affairs well. So my question, just to reiterate, is with the financial cuts that we have to make, is it fair that it will be proportional across all the departments, or will there be some concessions for those departments that have been managing their financial affairs properly? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arun. Honorable Manyi, please come in.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. I think the first point ready to make is that the input by the minister, as from yesterday already, was far from inspiring. If anything, it's very deflating. It does not help the psyche of the nation going forward. Here we have a presentation that talks about all kinds of global challenges, and yet there's nothing that is being said by the minister to ensure that the domestic economy is stimulated. So question number one, what is it that the minister is doing to help, in particular, the private sector, which is the backbone of our economy, in order for them to do what they need to do? SARS is milking the poor private sector like trying to get blood out of stones. And yet the minister and his cabinet are doing everything to undermine what the private sector could do. An example is an issue of how the issue of load shedding is being managed, where you find companies, you go to various sectors, you find people sitting and waiting for electricity. Yet this same electricity is available when there are nice things like Rugby World Cup and all these endless indabas and all of that, there's electricity. But when main things must happen, like business must run, then there's no electricity. Then there is no electricity even for the children, the future of our nation. So, and I know that there's other departments that deal with this, but Treasury is at the center of managing this, because if Treasury does not do what it needs to do, everything else falls flat. The minister complains about the rising debts of the country, the issue of the debt costs becoming a significant line item. But this government is doing the exact opposite to manage this. Every day we hear how Ramaphosa is going around the world with cap in hand to the IMF, how he's going around the world with cap in hand to all these countries that want us to make stupid decisions of closing our coal mines, which gave us base load, and for us to depend on these undependable renewable energies. So we're doing everything to undermine the economy of the country, and we come here and pretend that the world is the one that is responsible for our lackluster performance. I really think this is actually quite shameful. So I want to know, why is it that we have a load shedding manipulation in this country that is anti-growth of the economy? At the same time, we just complain about how the load shedding is affecting us, and yet it's all in the hands of this government. Why are we being played here, as it were? Last question. The state-owned enterprises are also struggling to, in fact, they're collapsing. And one of the reasons they're collapsing is also the stringent requirements of this PFMA. These state-owned enterprises are supposed to be competing toe-to-toe with private sector, but private sector is working with a very elaborate framework of a Company Act. Why is it that the Minister of Finance does not liberate these state-owned enterprises so that they can do what they can to do their part? I mean, just like we've done with Telkom. Telkom is flourishing now because Telkom does not have to deal with triple PFA. Telkom does not have to deal with PFMA. Why can't all companies, state-owned companies, be relieved from this extreme red tape called PFMA? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable. Minister muted. Are you muted? DG?
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Maybe let me start by appealing to the committee that as a matter of urgency, would like the Eskom Debt Relief Amendment Bill, together with the Division of Revenue Amendments Bill, to get some priority. That's our appeal, Comrade and Honorable Chair. Normally, in the medium-term budget policy statement, we don't deal with tax issues. Tax issues are dealt with in the normal budget in February. To the extent that there's an expectation that we should say something, or we should say something now about tax matters, I think it's too early to make such a commitment whether we're going to increase tax or not. It's too early to say that. Secondly, the SRD, we've done two things. We've extended the SRD to March 2025. That is subject to the review of the entire social protection system in South Africa, which will be engaging a number of departments, as social development included, and see whether we are likely to emerge with a new architecture of social protection. Failing which, if that process takes longer than we have thought, we have been cautious to make a provisional allocation for the 2 other years. Insofar as the other taxes, which the honorable member said should be reduced, maybe the team is online, including Chris and the implications of reducing that, the implication of all of these things, fuel levy and so on. Is there any details on Transnet bailout? The answer is no. We are still engaging Transnet on what their requirements is. About a week or so when Transnet approached us with a request for roughly, if I round it up, about 50 billion rand over the next 2 years. Obviously, we don't want to repeat the template, which has happened with others. An example, for instance, we've had Eskom for years, and funded them about 283 billion rand to date, and we're beginning to start a new process of funding of another 254 billion rand, combined figure of R500 billion to Eskom, without necessarily focusing on power to the grid, fixing the institution. All these years we've been trying to fix Eskom, not to fix power to the grid. So that template has not necessarily been a useful template. The colleagues are going to add to some of these issues. Something which I find strange is how does the NHI comes into the equation? Because the NHI is still, legislation is still before Parliament. A number of members have referred to the NHI. To the extent that if that is a proxy for some health cuts, which I think Honorable Kaiso made reference to the HIV. My understanding from health is that, in fact, they've realized some saving in the procurement of the ARVs, and substantial savings for that matter, and therefore this will not have an impact on them. Dr. Peterson will deal with the Eskom that, and I think other colleagues that Chris on the system will do them. The cuts have not been proportional. The cuts have been strategic. That's why, for instance, you see we're making 24 billion rand available to certain departments and 74 billion over the MTF. Mr. Manya says, what intervention are we making in terms of helping the private sector? That's precisely the issues we've raised. Let me recap that. And in this section, under growing the economy, we kind of highlight a number of interventions that are necessary. For instance, we've got to deal with the electricity issue. If you look at the South African economy, if I may say, the outage started out in 2008 in March. And to date, our economy has been almost stagnant, precisely in my view, because of the performance of the electricity sector. And that matter needs to be dealt with effectively. Secondly, we're dealing with the issue of the we're dealing with the issue of the logistics, which is coming as the new kind of constraint. And thirdly, crime and corruption are a fundamental point. In any event, if you look at both Eskom and Transnet, by the way, a complicating factor has been state capture, which is corruption. So we're making those interventions. Mr. Manya makes an assumption which is incorrect, that Mr. Ramaphosa goes around raising and there is a team that is dealing with loan and borrowing. It's only sitting in Treasury called Asset and Liability Team. And that team borrows approximately 2 billion rand a day. I myself, I don't even have the energy to follow what they are doing, let alone Ramaphosa doing that. Liberating the state-owned enterprises, I would invite an honorary member to go back under the procurement section of the medium-term budget policy statement, where we specifically say we're dealing with Schedule 2 companies to make sure that they are liberated from a number of these constraints the member is dealing with. Local government equitable share has been has been exempt from cuts. What cuts we've done in local government has been on the grant section. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Let's come down to the PEP. You deal with PEP. You deal with that. SARS and giving SARS money. I know SARS has been always coming to Parliament. I don't know whether it's the appropriate way of pitching for a budget is to rush to Parliament. I don't think is the appropriate way. By the way, we've given them an extra R1 billion this financial year, precisely for that reason. Let's hope that we'll get that in place. On the new equitable formula, let me say one point. I have not promised any new equitable formula. Maybe my predecessors did. New equitable formula is a dynamic concept which changes from time to time depending on data available. In the light of Census 22, now, surely the equitable formula will have to be rejigged to reflect the changing data which has emerged in 2022. That's the first point. Secondly, equitable formula with the vertical component. Let me take over. The vertical component reflects functions. If you look at the police, for instance, which is a national function, It sits at about 100 billion, 111 billion non-budget. We can go on and on. Correctional services. All of those departments are heavy in personnel and their functions, and therefore, from a vertical split, it is a reflection of those functions. Horizontal, it reflects a function on a number of things. For instance, the fact that the population dynamics have changed is likely to have an impact on the revenue sharing between provinces. That is going to take place. On the disaster, I don't know what the honorable member is saying when you say is less than the need. It may well be the need out there is more. What we have before us are requests that has come through the Disaster Management Center. And those requests that have come through the Disaster Management Center, we have funded them.